It's radio as the David Jacobs Memorial Drinks Trolley.
There it is.
Trundles past, but not. And as it goes past, Sister Susie grabs what from its lower regions?
Caprinias for us all today, which is made with cachaça, which is from Brazil. Think of mojitos, but without the rum and with something else instead. Because I'm celebrating that it's still light outside.
It is still light, and it's going to be light for at least another hour, roughly speaking.
Wow,
give
brilliant.
or take. So tonight's tale comes from Graham. Graham, thank you very much indeed for Monday's confession. You get the smart speaker. Good evening, Simon, Matt and Susie. I'm looking for forgiveness for an event that happened in the early 1970s. I mean, a lot of people start their email like that. When my father was based in Cyprus and I was a young schoolboy. I was the eldest of 4 in the family, 12 at the time. And like many school children of the forces, I was sent back to the UK for schooling and then spent some of my holidays in Cyprus with my parents. This particular summer, 2 of my cousins had been invited to stay with us. These 2 young boys, slightly younger than me, were known to be mischievous and always got themselves into trouble. Now, Cyprus, as you might know, in the height of summer can be extremely hot. But my mother had decided it was best that we as a family do some sightseeing before it got to the peak of the season. So she suggested that we visit a particular castle which was built and used by the Crusaders called Colossi Castle. Capital K. It was only a short drive from the British base in Episcopi and where we lived, and at our arrival, my mother parked the car under a shaded tree. This castle is very similar to the Tower of London in shape, but instead of the London rain, this is in the fierce sunshine and was built from dry stone and had a small drawbridge. My mother and my sisters entered a small wooden shack, which was the ticket office to pay for entry for all of us, whilst me and my cousins waited opposite the drawbridge for her return. Being boys, we were mucking around, and I then noticed above the drawbridge entrance a swarm of black buzzy things, which I was fairly certain were flies, maybe blue bottles at the most. I grabbed a stone from the ground. By the way, I should have said,
Yeah.
don't do any of the things which
No.
Graham is about to do.
Okay.
I grabbed a stone from the ground and decided to bombard this large swarm of obviously black flies with stones. My cousins joined in. It seemed such fun.
Okay.
It's the 1970s.
Yeah.
After many misses, I finally got a beauty right into the middle of them. Well, these guys were not happy and they started to swarm, and they swarmed down to where we had been and decided to give us a little bit of what was called at the time, I believe, aggro. They were, as it turned out, not flies or even blue bottles, not even bees or wasps, Father Simon, but actually hornets.
Oh, dear.
They swarmed down onto us boys and we all ran into the lake fully clothed. We dived under the water to save ourselves, as you would. Once they couldn't get to us, these rotten hornets headed to the ticket office, and I have never seen so many old people run as fast as they could to join us in the lake by the castle. Old and young, they tore into the water, submerging themselves regardless of whether they were wearing posh frocks or casual slacks and jackets. If you went to a castle in the 1970s, if you weren't wearing slacks, you were in trouble. What a bedraggled bunch we all were, Father Simon. The visitors on top of the castle, of course, got the best view as they could see all of us running towards the lake and diving into the water to avoid these pesky hornets. We all had to be... Here's the rub. We all had to be taken to the hospital on base to have the hornet stings removed from our hair. Which was extremely painful, and we were given the right cream and so on. We were all very lucky that we weren't hospitalised. When asked by my mother who actually caused this event, I was quick to blame my cousins, of course, as they had a history of this kind of thing. Naughty was their middle name. That's what small cousins are for, don't you think? Passing on the blame. She believed me and they were duly punished. So Simon, Matt and Susie, I request forgiveness from you for all those people in the ticket office who were stung and never saw the castle, my mother for the little white lie, but mainly my lovely cousins who grew up to be superb members of the community. One was a royal protection officer for a popular royal family. I mean, we're keeping that not very vague, whoever they might be. And the other is a senior captain at a well-known airline.
Oh, right.
Okay, well, that's, well, you know, that kind of narrows it down, but clearly nothing, you know, they all turned out fine in the end. But a nasty business, Sister Susie. What do you say to Graham?
Yeah, well, I think I made my decision at the black buzzy things because it's never a good idea. Now, I know this was later than the 70s, but just reminds me of the My Girl film. It's dangerous. Could have been wasps, hornets, whatever they were, never ever good. And I just think those poor people in that ticket office got stung everywhere. No, thank you. Graham, should have been better.
So not forgiven. I haven't been stung by a hornet, but it sounds a very unpleasant business altogether. Brother from another gutter?
Well, I mean, I'm going to say that these hornets were probably going to sting people anyway. That's the very essence of being a hornet, is they were on the lookout for it. And it just, I can't believe that they would have followed them because they chucked a stone at them. I don't think hornets are that intelligent. So, and everyone else did very well.
The hornets wouldn't have done anything if
straight into the lake.
No.
No, I think the hornets, they're hell-bent on, I'm going to sting things and leave my sting, and everyone else is going to have to go and get cream in the hospital. Everyone turned out fine in the end, and, the cousins probably had it coming. If they weren't to blame for that one, they were probably to blame for something else. So, for that reason, I'm going to forgive.
Have you ever done jury service?
Never. No. Show me the way.
That would be a scary prospect. Excuse me, Your Honour. Anyway, the people's verdict, please. Do you forgive Graham for his Hornet Cypriot-based misdemeanour? On the text, please, 61054. First word is Simon. However, tonight's confession came from Graham, a tale from Cyprus in the 1970s, where he was responsible for a hornet attack on innocent civilians, and he blamed his cousins. Here's the people's verdict.
Basically, nobody's forgiving tonight. Steph says, not forgiven. Having grown up in a tropical location with loads of stinging and buzzing insects, rule number 1 is you don't aggravate them.
Yes.
Total muppet. Bertrand says, I agree with Susie, completely not forgiven. These poor hornets were just going about their own business and got disturbed by a silly young boy.
Called Graham.
Yeah, indeed. And Jerry, who's as much of a fan of puns as I am, says, not forgiven. There's always going to be a sting in the tail if you stir up a hornet's nest. Glad they didn't get a buzz out of it.
Okay, well, we're going to leave it there, I think, because that's becoming insufferable. Your confession, please. confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. So it's Drinks Trolley time, which is always our favourite moment. Sir David Jacobs' memorial trolley arrives, and Susie has grabbed something from the top shelf. What have you gone for? Oh, hang on, I've got to
half,
fade you up.
but a West Coast.
Say that again.
I've gone for a half of a West Coast Pale Ale from More Beer that's called Mando, which is celebrating The Mandalorian.
Oh, The Mandalorian, fantastic series.
But we've had it on the bar this week, and it's gone down really well. So
excellent, very good. I feel as though we're live in the pub every single day, which is precisely because we are. That's what's going on. Tonight's confession comes from Stig. Thanks, Stig. Father Simon and the Confessional Collective. Now, I should say that there's an element of toilet humour.
Oh, good.
Oh, no.
My favourite.
Not forgiven.
Stig says, I asked forgiveness for 2 willful acts of mischief. Several years ago, while staying... And I wouldn't normally do this kind of thing, but I'm doing it for this. While staying at my then-girlfriend's, now lovely wife's house, I played what I thought at the time was a hilarious prank on my in-laws. So normally I get to the line, hilarious prank, and think, no, don't think so.
Yeah.
Late one evening, I slipped into my in-laws' bedroom, and I hid a remote-controlled electronic whoopee cushion device under my father-in-law Michael's side of the bed. That night, I retired to the guest bedroom and slept like an innocent child. I woke the next morning bright and early, as is my norm, and the rest of the family was sound asleep in their beds. Michael and Sandra, future father and mother-in-law, were in the next room sound asleep. I pressed the activate button for the first time, and a small popping noise came from the room.
So
Nothing not to work. Give it a minute or two, then I pressed it again. A couple of pops and a boff.
Oh, lovely.
So Sandra wakes up and could be heard saying, Michael, go to the bathroom. A couple of pops. Michael, go to the bathroom. Now. Michael is fast asleep, but slowly waking up, wondering why his wife is insisting that he gets out of bed. He assured Sandra he did not need the bathroom. A couple more presses of my button.
Yeah.
Instantly followed by the unmistakable sound of flesh on flesh as Sandra slaps Michael. Go to the bathroom! Michael is pushed out of bed and ordered towards the family bathroom. Michael still none the wiser as to what on earth is going on. Fast forward several years and 2 children later. Now happily married to Michael's daughter, Lisa, we decided it would be a good idea to house 2 French students who'd come to England to improve their English. Jan and Nathan were 14 years old, polite, charming, and a little shy. We had a bedroom for each of the boys, but as they were in a foreign land far from home and feeling a little uneasy, they asked if they could share one room. Not a problem. The room with twin beds was good and ready to go. To make the lads relax, Father Simon, and feel at home and bond with the family, it was time to introduce them to English humour.
Of course.
The electronic whoopee cushion. During dinner, I popped the device under Nathan's bed. Later that night, the boys retired exhausted after their long journey to the UK. 10 p.m. lights out. 5 minutes later, the first trumpety trump came from under Nathan's bed, quickly followed by the following translation, which I will translate for you. Jan says, "Nathan, you have to stop it."
That's not a translation.
What?
Nathan, you have to stop it. What?
Nathan says,
Come on.
"It is not me." Jan says, "Well, it's not me. We are guests in this house." Papa,
Hang on.
Jan says, "Nathan, that is disgusting.
Where
You
are
have
they
to
from?
stop.
Yeah, I was going to say.
It must be you. It wasn't me." And so on. This
And
is
so
kind
on
of-
in
this is
that-
the
in that
general
South
gist.
African accent.
Well, I entered the room and I put the light on, asking if everything is okay. Jan, visibly upset, tries to explain that there is an unmistakable sound of flatulence in the room, and it is not him, quickly followed by Nathan, who says it's not him either. I explained to both boys that I owed them an apology. I explained to them that we had bought the house from a lovely old lady who had actually died in that very room.
No.
What?
And
No.
from time to time, she made a visit. But they must not worry, she was entirely harmless. She might actually stroke their hair and bid them good night and sweet dreams and so on. Anyway, she's a friendly ghost.
Okay.
So I turned the light off. The light was immediately back on again.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I'm not surprised.
2 young French voices were flying to and fro across the room as I'm pressing the button, a boffity-boff and a poppity-pop. And there's a couple of French screams. I returned to the room to see Jan and Nathan cuddled together in the same bed, eyes wide open. They explained that they did not see the old lady, but her presence could still be heard. At this point, I should reassure you and let you know that I came clean and retrieved the device, showing both boys the real culprit wasn't a boffing poltergeist, but an electronic whoopee cushion. Jan and Nathan returned to our house several times afterwards, and they remain family friends. Mm-hmm. But clearly, I have to ask forgiveness from my late father-in-law, Michael, who never knew why he was assaulted and marched to the bathroom by his wife. And from Jan and Nathan for convincing them that England was a land filled with flatulent ghosts. And Jan's family, who he pranked for years afterwards with the same device, which he insisted on taking back to France because he thought if it was good enough for the English, then it was going to be good enough for him. And so therefore, it's a very good tale with across the ocean.
Channel.
Across the channel. Implications. For the entente cordiale.
Yeah, very good.
Thank you. Sister Susie, what do you say?
Nice. Well, Stig, I just think no. I was nearly forgiving you with the electronic whoopee cushion because that was very funny and I did like the French accents. But as soon as you brought the ghost into it, you lost me because that would have terrified me at 14. And even though you came clean, I just wouldn't have been able to sleep. And I'm sure those poor boys were traumatised. So not forgiven from me.
It's an interesting mind that goes, yes, and doesn't so immediately, well, it's just a joke, but says, no, actually, it's because there's a woman who died in this room.
No, very good.
We have a flatulent ghost. Brother from another gutter.
I'm going to forgive,
Terrified.
and here is the reason why. Is it reminds me that no matter how sophisticated we all think we are, and we all rolled our eyes as soon as we heard about the electronic flatulent thing, it is still very funny. Flatulence just is funny. Boffing, parping, all of that is just very funny. So yes, I'm definitely going to forgive just for that.
And anyway, ghosts wouldn't have wind, would they?
Well, I mean, they've got everything else.
No, because
I mean, if we're going to accept that they're there, then they may as well have.
Anyway, it's the People's Verdict. Do you forgive Stig? Yes or no? It's the People's Verdict, please. On the text 61054, the first word is Simon. The key thing is, do you forgive Stig? Yes or no? Explain why. 61054, first word is Simon. Thank you very much. However, just before the news, you remember Stig sent in an email, and it was his confession about extensive use of an electronic whoopee cushion, which he first made his father-in-law suffer, and then some visiting French students who he made thought it was a ghost. With the wind problem. Anyway, the People's Verdict came in, and this is what it says.
So Mick Imbued says, not forgiven. As Susie said, I'd have been traumatised if I'd been told a ghost was in my room. But Honey in Westbury says he's forgiven. After all, he's put smiles on a lot of people's faces. Plus, he came clean and apologised to the two lads. I must get myself one of those Trump machines. I can have me a lot of fun with one of those. And finally, Angela King in Paddock Wood says, forgiven. Like Matt said, flatulence is never not funny. P.S. The most amusing part of this confession was you questioning whether or not ghosts have wind.
Well, it is an issue which has been under discussed.
It has been under discussed.
Your confession, please, to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. That's the way to do it. Well, now, look. Let's get that drinks trolley trundling past Susie. Yes, okay. So what have you taken from the top shelf there?
Well, I've taken a very large bottle of white wine, a Sauvignon Blanc, because I watched loads of tributes to Paul O'Grady and Lily Savage today, and there was one of this morning with Richard and Judy where she was getting absolutely sloshed on the on the show, and I just thought that was fantastic. So let's raise a glass for Paul this evening with a nice Sauvignon Blanc.
That's a very good idea. Thank you. So as far as today's confession is concerned, which comes from Harry, everything in this confession is not to be repeated by anybody.
Oh, this is going to be good.
No.
Thoroughly dangerous. Father Simon, it ends, I've kept this secret for 30 years. So, Father Simon, I have a confession to make. My dear wife is a brilliant mother and kept our house so clean and tidy. Her friends once presented her on her birthday with a cake made in the shape of a vacuum cleaner. She loved vacuum cleaners and was something of an expert. Various models were effectively road tested by her and rejected as not up to the job. So they were handed down to me for use in external tasks, such as cleaning the cars on the weekend. One such reject was a small Scarlet 3-wheeled type, which became affectionately known as R2-D2. At around the same time, I became the proud owner of a boat named Broadsword, so I could approach the shore and, to the amusement or annoyance of others, radio call my brother with that well-known refrain, Broadsword calling Danny Boy, for him to collect me from the shore and perhaps find our way home via a pint of the local. Anyway, I was told that at the end of the season, with the sailing season, it was best to drain all the internal fuel tanks of petrol. The accepted way of doing so was to insert a small tube into the tanks and then siphon the fuel out. This was no mean feat, as the distance involved was appreciable and the height it had to reach was more than a human being could manage. So after some time trying to create enough suction manually to create the siphon and failing, I was faced with a dilemma. You might know where this is heading. Ignore the firm advice I had been given and just leave the fuel there and find the engine would not start easily next season, or find a solution. Well, it was the weekend, and so I was cleaning out the cars. I had a light bulb moment. Instead of huffing and puffing, I could use R2-D2 to help create the suction necessary to start the siphon of the petrol. So that's why I said, don't do any of this. So I united the end of the transparent pipe that was inserted into the tank to R2-D2. In a matter of seconds, I could see the fuel coming up the pipe and over the highest point and down to the bit where it was below the level of the fuel in the tank. Remembering my physics, I put the end of the pipe into the petrol tank in the can, switched off R2-D2 and stood back to admire my work. It was working like a treat. The fuel flowed for a while through R2-D2, but then stopped. There was a little less than I expected in the petrol can, and so I thought, let's just be sure I'll rerun the system of priming the siphon.
Oh, no.
So I returned R2-D2 and returned to it and pressed the little button to turn it on. I was more than a little surprised at the response. The engine started, but then in a few seconds, the afterburners cut in. Flames! The exhaust flap flew off, and R2-D2 headed off in an easterly direction at some speed, coming to an abrupt halt when the electric cable became discounted from its source. Luckily, I had a powder fire extinguisher to hand, and I doused the flames. All became quiet and calm again. I breathed a sigh of relief and looked round to check for witnesses. There were none. I examined R2-D2's burnt behind, and upon reflection, my lightning-quick reactions had meant there was some, but not a lot, of melted plastic around the exhaust.
Not a lot.
Not a lot, just a bit.
So having retrieved the exhaust flap from the other side of the garden, I replaced it, and all looked well. Well, as well as it could be. A few weeks later, I'm carrying out the weekend duties where my better half decides to help out, and in doing so, she set about cleaning her car with the faithful R2-D2. Once done, it was time to put him away, and in doing so, her eagle eye for detail noticed the effect of the afterburners on the plastic. I made light of it, saying perhaps it had been too near the radiator, or some pathetic excuse like that, until it was pointed out there were no radiators in the garage.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So I was detailed to take R2D... Here we go. This is now the confession. I was detailed to take R2-D2 back to the shop where it had been bought and demand a refund or a replacement. I dutifully set out and returned later with a replacement on the basis the retailer had agreed. This was a very unusual occurrence, and a replacement was the correct policy.
Okay.
I have kept this dark secret for over 30 years, but now it is the time to come clean.
Wow.
I would have thought the Hoover seller might have noticed the smell of petrol, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, and all the meltedness.
Yes, I mean, yes, no, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Anyway,
Absolutely.
please, so just to be absolutely clear, never use an electrical appliance to form the siphon if trying to get all the fuel out of your boat.
Out of my boat.
In fact,
oh, right, okay.
don't use the Hoover for anything like that.
No.
Because just use the cleaner for its correct purpose and nothing to do with anything else. Sister Susie.
Exactly what you said. Use the Hoover to vacuum and clean, and that's what it's there for, and that's what it's doing. And it was very funny, Carrie, so you did make me giggle, and, you know, I do appreciate that you supported your local pub on the way home from being on the boat, so that's good.
Oh.
However, it's just, you said it right at the beginning, that was dangerous. And not only that, but then you trying to blame the shopkeeper for a dud item. No chance you're getting forgiveness from me today, I'm afraid.
No, it is. It's hard to think of anything more dangerous, really, than siphoning petrol out of a boat through a Hoover.
Well, I mean, we've all learned something today,
actually,
haven't we?
Can I just say it was R2-D2?
It was R2-D2, wasn't it? Yes. I mean, I didn't know that you shouldn't do that, but we've all realised that now, and we all realise in retrospect that it's a bad idea to use R2-D2 to get the fuel. Yeah, we've all learned something today, I think. I'm going to forgive, because really, I mean, we're asking to be forgiven about him talking to the shop, and the shop have done what they should have done, which is replace R2-D2.
No, they should have sent him away with a flea.
No, because quite clearly R2-D2 had failed there. But I'm going to forgive mainly for the where equals dare reference. Broadsword calling Danny Boy.
Yeah, that was good.
That.
Of course.
That was
Oh,
good.
very good.
I think his brother is called Danny as well, so that kind of
Nice.
worked. So anyway, it's the people's verdict, please. Do you forgive Harry? Yes or no? The answer, of course, is no.
No.
But anyway, the people's verdict. 61054, first word is Simon. The people's verdict incoming in the next hour. Earlier, a confession from Harry about a siphoning system he had set up from his boat to the petrol can via a vacuum cleaner. Not a good idea. Flames, melted vacuum cleaner. Took it back because it wasn't working and got a new one. Anyway, the people's verdict, here it comes.
Tim from Sutton says, forgiven, the image of R2-D2 heading east on his afterburners made me cry with laughter. Gemma in Bath, not forgiven. Not only did Harry do something dangerous and ridiculously daft, he also lied to the vacuum salesman to get a refund.
He did.
But Jerry says, not forgiven. Harry sounds like someone who will always be a sucker for a light bulb moment. Petrol and electricity do not mix.
That is definitely true, but you forgave him.
Because
Of I can't
broadsword calling Danny Boy.
That's the reason. Anyway, your confessions, please. We would like to receive it. If we use it, you get a smart speaker. Confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Oh, there he goes. It's the drinks trolley.
Nice.
Just grab something there from the middle shelf for us today.
Well, then that will be elderflower cordial, which you can have with sparkling water if you want a 0% non-alcohol drink. Or, Matt, you will prefer it with a nice glass
Whiskey.
of fizz.
Gin.
Well,
Lovely.
you could have it with gin.
Yes.
But you should try it with English sparkling or maybe a carver.
Very good. Thank you very much. Today's confession comes from Roy. Now, normally, we change the names of people who are involved in this story. You're about to find out why that isn't possible for this one.
Okay.
Simon, Matt and Susie, my story is based about and around Peter Shilton.
Oh, really?
So,
Okay, so you can't change his name.
I mean, I could change his name to Brian Johnson or something, but there's no point.
It wouldn't work.
My story's based around when Peter Shilton was the goalkeeper for Stoke City in the 1970s.
Okay.
So that is the Peter Shilton. 11 clubs, 1,000 league games, 2 European Cups, First Division Championship, and 125 England caps. So England's most capped player.
Yeah.
A
Wow.
football legend and ranked in the top 10 goalkeepers of the 20th century. He had joined Stoke for £325,000, a world record for a goalkeeper. We are setting the stage.
Yes, clearly.
You get the idea. Even non-footballers out there will understand and know who we're talking about. My dad was football mad and even tried out once for Port Vale Reserves.
Oh.
It ran in his blood. He loved everything to do with football and considered footballers to be gods, to be worshipped and adored. He might even have got somewhere at Port Vale, but his main downfall was that he was under 6 foot tall. He could not dominate the box, Father Simon, and crosses weren't for him, really. So when I came along and turned out to be quite tall, he thought I was a goalkeeper in the making. I got goalie gloves for Christmas, how-to guides to the art of goalkeeping, a green jersey for my birthday, and a Gordon Banks cap and annual for Christmas. But sadly, from my father's perspective, I was never really that interested. I mean, who wants to be a goalkeeper? What is the point of that?
Right.
Standing between the posts, diving into the mud, crashing into the posts, that is for losers, Father Simon. However, my father managed one time to get me the gig of being a ball boy at the old Victoria ground, Stoke-on-Trent. Now, obviously for some, this was the thrill of a lifetime, but for me, I was like, meh, as we didn't say.
We didn't say the 70s.
In the 70s. Anyway, so the first half went okay. I had no idea who we were playing, by the way.
Oh, right.
Threw the ball back a few times, that kind of thing. Then it rained. What a disaster. The ball became this heavy, wet leather thing. What is the appeal of heading this? It seems such a drag. Anyway, just 45 minutes to go. But for the second half, I was put behind Peter Shilton at the Boothen end. Again, all was going well. Recover the ball, pick it up. Wipe my hands, throw it back. Fine, but then the ball went into the deep gully behind the goals. Now, I'm not sure why it was there, but it was like a pit or a trench, maybe. This is the 1970s, remember?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the ball had just landed in it. Well, I looked down and I decided it so wasn't happening for me.
Okay.
Again, as we did.
Right.
No thanks. No, not down there. I didn't put it there. I pretended I hadn't noticed. I realised this wasn't appropriate behaviour for a ball boy. There were some shouts, as I recall, but they were vulgar. Coarse language was used, Father Sam, and I was taking no notice. However, as a result of my behaviour, Peter Shilton himself went and got the ball. 11 clubs, 125 caps, 2 European Cups, 1,000 league games, Britain's most expensive goalkeeper, in the gully, getting the ball, getting muddy. In theory, it was my job, but in practice, he was nearer.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, that's fine.
It's like a playground game,
Yeah.
as far as Roy's concerned. I was never asked back, which, to be honest, came as a relief. My dad never said anything, but I could tell he was disappointed. I think that's probably right. And so I asked forgiveness from Peter Shilton, OBE, for him having to jump down the gully. In my defence, it looked very deep to a 12-year-old. I await your decisions, and I accept my fate. Well, it's certainly very different, and we had to obviously name the goalkeeper in question.
Yeah,
it
clearly.
couldn't stay anonymous. And also, Peter Shilton comes out of it very well, because
He does, yeah.
even though the ball boy was ignoring it, so Peter went and got the ball himself. Sister Susie, what are you thinking?
Well, Roy, do you know what? I kind of agree with you on many facts here. If if it's raining and the ball's wet and it goes in a deep gully, what am I going to jump down there for? And so, I might have been there for that reason, but that doesn't seem like any fun for a 12-year-old. So, do you know what? I think your dad's disappointment was probably enough. So I am going to give you forgiveness.
Okay, interesting. Brother from another...
I mean, it wasn't really for Roy, was it? It wasn't the thing he wanted to do, so that's fair enough. And the 70s, different time when, there was no multi-ball then, was there? You only had the one ball to play with, and if it went into the gully, then you had to go and pick it out. And I'm sure selfless act by Peter Shilton will have endeared him to his teammates, you'd hope. So I am definitely going to forgive.
Right, so it's a double... Right, so you're forgiving?
Yes.
Susie is forgiving? Let's see if the Greatest Hits Radio listener is equally forgiving. Does Roy get your forgiveness? On the text, please, 61054, and you start your message with Simon. 61054, first word is Simon. People's verdict, here it comes.
So forgiveness basically depends on how you feel about Peter Shilton or Port Vale. Stanley says, not forgiven. I'm a Port Vale supporter and we hate Stoke. Robert from Borden says, I forgive, as Peter Shelton should have stopped it in the first place and saved the young ball boy from going down the gully. And finally, Denton from Huddersfield says, absolutely forgiven. I recall that not saved goal against Poland in the World Cup qualifier, which cost England a place at the 74 World Cup finals. Shilton deserved to get muddy gloves that rainy day at Stoke, so good riddance to him and his fancy gloves.
Right, so not really based on any evidence presented at all.
Not really fair.
Anyway. All right, very good. So if you have a confession, maybe inspired by that one, we'd like to see it. Confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk.